You're a human, probably at least, which means that scientists could study your brain. What if we designed an experiment to study how people perceive magic? We could empirically test what kind of magic people prefer and even what kind of emotions people most want to experience when watching a magic show. Surely the results of such an experiment would steer magicians towards performing better magic. But in this case, I'm not so sure that science can offer us a good answer. Let me explain. In 2016, magician Joshua Jay teamed up with Dr. Lisa Grimm to run a study on how people perceive magic. The study involved two separate pieces. First, the researchers asked participants about their preconceived notions about how they liked magic and what they liked about it. The second part involved them actually watching a magic performance and then afterwards answering these similar questions about what they liked most about magic. First, some good news for magicians. People generally like magic, at least more than going to the dentist. What's more interesting though is that the study looked at what people liked most about magic. And they did this by using a free response question, meaning that participants were allowed to write whatever they wanted. After that, the researchers presumably used a thematic clustering analysis to pick out certain themes that emerged in many people's responses, things like surprise or amazement. And in fact, 25% of people reported that they liked the element of surprise best. Joshua Jay even writes that this revelation has caused me to reevaluate my magic. It made me reflect on the tricks I do in terms of where and how often I offer my audiences genuine surprise. But this is where things get tricky. Is this compelling enough evidence for magicians to rewrite their shows to include more surprise? Well, the first problem with this conclusion, in my opinion at least, is that this data is based on people's preconceived ideas of what they like about magic. And unless you're a magician yourself, you probably don't spend that much time thinking about magic. And further, you probably haven't even seen that much magic in life, at least in person. And in fact, this study confirms that idea, stating that most of the magic that people see is online. And the magic we see online is inherently different than the magic you would see in person. Magic is a collaborative art form between the audience and the magician. So if you're seeing it online, you're only getting a small fraction of the experience, which means your preconceived notions of what magic isn't necessarily accurate. What this means is that if you're interested in people's opinions on internet magic, these results are probably pretty valid. But if you're interested in how people feel about in-person magic, these results may not be as reliable. And unfortunately, this issue still exists in part 2 of the study, because although they were watching magic, it was still video clips of magic, which means they're missing that important collaborative element. That being said, part 2 of the study did find similar results, with people still preferring an element of surprise even after immediately just watching a magic show. What this means is that this preference for surprise isn't skewed by this preconceived issue. It seems that people do genuinely prefer this element of surprise. But this is where my skepticism really starts to take hold. In part 2 of this study, surprise was grouped with unexpected and unique features of magic. So my question is, what do we really mean when we say people prefer surprise? What is surprise? I would argue that the experience that we get when we view something impossible like a magic trick are very complex and difficult to describe. So what this study is asking people to do is take this very complex experience and pick out their favorite part and label it. And many people, when asked to do that, come up with the word surprise or something along those lines. But if you Google synonyms of the word surprise, you get words like awe, astonishment, or amazement. And according to this study, the second thing that people prefer most is amazement. So my question is, to what degree is surprise and amazement actually describing the same underlying emotion, just using different words to describe it? When you witness something truly impossible, like you do in a magic show, it's really difficult to come up with words to explain what that emotion is, what it's like to feel something violate the laws of nature. And so I might argue that amazement and surprise are really just describing this core underlying experience of what it's like to witness something impossible. But this is something that future research could account for. There's ways of analyzing data to see to what extent different words are used to describe the same underlying construct. This is where I want to take this idea of studying magic a step further though, Let's for a moment imagine that there was a ton of research funded into what it was like to experience magic. In this world where all this research was funded, we end up with a ton of data about what people tend to prefer and not prefer about magic. Would this data allow magicians to make better magic? And again, I'm still not so sure. My argument here isn't born of any skepticism from the scientific method or anything like that. Rather, my hesitation is due to the idea that magic is a form of art. Imagine trying to use science to make a better painting or a better song. There's scientists who have tried this, and they have certainly discovered principles that make something more aesthetically pleasing or not. But does aesthetically pleasing mean the same thing as better? I don't think so. Here's why. You could have a painting that's not aesthetically pleasing whatsoever. In fact, it could even be grotesque. And yet, we could still experience it as a masterpiece. Science helps us understand and explain the universe. Art, on the other hand, helps us experience the universe. And this difference between explaining and understanding versus experiencing is critical. There's a super famous thought experiment by philosopher Frank Jackson known as Mary's Room that helps describe this difference. Mary is a super scientist, and she spent her entire life studying the neurophysiology of vision and color. She's so smart, she understands every single detail about how the human eye takes in light and then consequentially can experience color. But there's a catch. Mary has spent her entire life in a black and white room. She has never firsthand experienced what it's like to see color. One day, she leaves the black and white room and for the first time sees color. This thought experiment is supposed to offer the intuition that even a complete explanation of a phenomena will always be missing something. Namely, it's missing what it's like to experience something for yourself. I believe that art, and consequentially magic, lives in this realm of experience. So, to tie this back to magic, my favorite art form, sure, we could study what makes magic aesthetically pleasing or fun to watch. But would this just be a distraction to the true quest of making better art? I've linked Joshua Jay's paper in the description. There's tons more data and analysis that I didn't cover in this video, and although I am skeptical of some of the conclusions made, it is still a fascinating paper and well worth your time to read, so go check it out.